Hello, and welcome to another episode of Virtualize Everything. Today isn't going to be our traditional DIY format. I wanted to spend some time talking about what I'm doing here. As you can see, we have or actually two Python programs up here in front of us that look very similar. They're actually both intended to do the same thing. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. I've been doing a lot of large text file handling to try and create a block list that I maintain. I've had a lot of frustration as I change Pi-hole installs very often as I move equipment around and work from different servers to bring you guys the best possible content. But that means that I reconfigure a lot of equipment quite often as I'm learning, changing things, developing things, both on the developmental side of my network and the user side of my network. Um, so what happens is I end up quite often losing my Pi-hole installs. Those Pi-hole installs, although quick and easy to set up and my block lists are saved, I often don't get back all of my URLs. So I started a project to collect all the URLs that I use on my web browsing and create a block list that I can distribute for you guys, hoping to help myself in not losing as many URLs. So, after collecting data, I ended up with just over 5 million URLs. And a lot of them were duplicates. Actually, over half of them were duplicates. So when I loaded it into Pi-hole, it took a long time to load in. It's a 160 meg file. Plus, most of those, or over half of those URLs, were rejected by Pi-hole as duplicates. Waste of time, waste of storage, waste of bandwidth distributing, everything. So I set off on a project to remove those duplicates from the list I had built. So what we're looking at here is my version 3 of my script and my version 2 of my script. Now, you can see in version 2 that I am actually using regular expressions or re. Now you can see I've imported it in here and that's actually should just be removed. It's poor maintenance on my part for a script that I may use often, but right now I'm not planning on using more than one or two times a year as I do updates on the list and redistribute it. So I'm I should clean it up. I really should. I'm by no means a skilled Python programmer. In fact, I don't write Python very often. I have an 8-week class in Python. I do a little bit of work here and there to use it for tools, for using it for projects, but I don't do this very often. This is not my specialty. Um, I just want to put that out there. But what I wanted to show you was the decrease in time between the version 2 program and using re or regular expressions and the version 3 program that just uses loops. So as you can see here, I'm using an if statement with a for loop, or with a loop, that looks at the the outgoing file that we're appending to and the incoming file that we're gathering the information from, and compares them before running write, which appends to the end of the outgoing file if there was no match previously in the outgoing file. So over here, I do the same thing, but I call a statement that runs a loop that runs another function that uses find all to see if that is in the loop, and then it is in the old file, then returns a value. If that value is not 0, it just prints it out so I can kind of tell what's running. Actually, it's kind of a waste of time, but I enjoy it. If the value is 0, it writes it to the end of the file, just like we did over here using the write to file function. So both programs do the same thing, but I want to show you the time difference in executing these two programs. So the file that we're pulling in, this file 33, is just over 500 kilobytes. So let's execute the version 2 of this program and look at it run. Now, this takes a fair amount of time. I'm working with a significantly smaller file, so you guys don't have to sit here and trudge through this for as long. So if you look here, the execution time at the end of this file that it took to run was 42.804 seconds. So let's go ahead and execute my version 3, which just uses an if statement and for loops for its logic. So the execution time for that second program was just 4 seconds. That's over 10 times a performance increase. Now, when you're executing a program like this on very large files like I am, this time savings compounds, because every time you add an extra line to this program, it takes milliseconds, maybe even less, but it takes a certain amount of time longer every single line you execute. So as we're getting into 2 million to 5 million lines in this text file that I'm working on, you can imagine some of these execution times are quite long. The final version of the block list that I put together took 9 hours to do the final list sorting and, well, not even list sorting, just a final comparison to make sure there was no duplicates. I have yet to sort the list. It is something I want to do. It will eventually help me as I do updates on this list with performance, I believe, because if we're going to get a match attempt, it may not have to travel as far per cycle in the match, and that may help me with performance. I also might be able to do something with a 4 range loop where I can actually take the position of the previous match and start there as I try to match two sorted lists to each other, which should, I would think, not create issues with having duplicates and accelerate the time that it takes, because as I get farther down the list, I'm starting farther down the list. So the time that it takes to get to the end of the list and for the script to realize that this is a unique URL diminishes as I execute the script. So, in theory, at least in the way I'm thinking, the longest part of execution of the script through the process is exactly half the size of the outgoing or the file that I am appending to, or the output file. I just wanted to take a look, just show you this. Virtualize Everything has a very simple website, blog style, content managed website that I've put together. And as you can see, my most recent post from today, I've actually shared with you a link to where you can find our block list. And if you copy this link and put it into your Pi-hole under your ad lists and update your Gravity, you will find that you can use our block list. Now, this block list is about 2.5 million URLs, so it's a pretty in-depth block list. I would suggest using a whitelist of some sort on your Pi-hole, because you are going to find that this block list pretty much blocks anything but the domain you're visiting. And sometimes it'll, in the cases of things like Facebook, where they have a lot of tracking and stuff on other websites, and I don't visit Facebook, you'll find that it'll just outright block it. Just something to be aware of. Using a whitelist is a good thing if you use our block list. It will help you. Of course, you can go through and pick the ones that you want to whitelist as you find broken things. That's kind of how I handle it, but it is a suggestion to use a whitelist. So I hope you liked everything and you were able to learn from some of my experience here with using Re versus using loop logic in Python. And have a good night.